The Campo and Joe podcast is brought to you by Bold City Heating and Air. Fast and reliable AC service.
Welcome into Campo and Joe, fired up and ready to go. I don't know if we're as fired up as the temperature is outside, but it was a little warm for the OTAs yesterday, and that's the OTAs that the media got to see. So, Coach, let's get into it.
Yes, sir.
Let's talk some Jaguar offseason football. Joe C. from XL Primetime, Dave Campo, our head coach, and we love talking Jag ball, just like you guys love your Jaguars. And I do think there's some enthusiasm, Coach. There's a certain level of excitement, and it comes with, I always say, see if you can go with me here. I've been accused of being the offseason optimist, okay? And so you got a big O, offseason, big O, optimist. It's because they're 0-0. Everyone's 0-0 right now.
I like that.
Yeah.
That's a reason you've been in radio as long as you have.
Good.
You've got that, that dynamic down.
So you're buying the idea that they're 0-0. No one's a loser right now. There's reason to be excited.
Right. Absolutely. And I'll tell you what, I'm excited about this season really based on, from an experience standpoint, that the way the season ended last year, there's a come to Jesus meeting. Mm-hmm. And I think these guys understand that they blew an opportunity. And sometimes that's a great indicator of what's going to happen the next year. And that's what I'm looking at. I'm looking at the fact that I think people downplay the injuries that they had at the end of the year, but I think they were significant. But I also think that there was a case of them feeling pretty good about themselves at 8-3.
Yeah.
Well, they don't feel that good about themselves. They feel optimism of we're going to straighten this out. And I think that's where we're at.
I don't know how much to make of this, and I'm going to try and have conversations weekly with guys. But the last couple of interviews, last two OTAs that we've been out, interviewed Andre Cisco and Chad Muma. And these are two guys that are vying for important spots, as you know. Cisco has his lockdown. Muma's got a chance, and we'll get into what you think of him. But anyway, the question that I asked to both of those guys, and I'm going to keep asking these defensive guys that were there last year, what happened? What happened post-December 1? And the theme was basically from both of these guys is that we needed to have a change. They didn't say it out loud, but they're basically indicating we needed to have a change to make sure that we were better prepared to go out and play on defense. And honestly, that's an indictment, Coach. But but they're saying what needed to happen.
Yeah, I think obviously they're being transparent when they say that. Sometimes you can look at it and say, the staff got dismissed. Mm-hmm. Here comes a new one. You're going to say, there was a little bit on the coaching staff.
Yeah, it can be a convenient excuse.
Yeah, absolutely. But I'm watching both of them. Mm-hmm. And what I know of Ryan Nielsen, I would say that Shuey was one of the guys they kept, the outside linebacker coach that coached Trayvon and Josh
Allen. Yeah.
And they both improved a great deal during the year. Mm-hmm. He's a teacher.
Yeah.
And I didn't see that on the field last year. You've heard me say this 100 times. When you put three guys together, it's called a bunch. Three receivers standing right next to each other.
Yeah.
And there's all kinds of crossing routes and everything else that come off of that. Well, for 2 years, they have not been able to play a bunch. Yeah. If this group can teach them how to play a bunch, which I'm confident they can, that's an improvement in itself.
A profound improvement.
Absolutely. So in my mind, I really think that there was a concern last year that there wasn't enough on-field coaching, and really there had to be a little disconnect between coaches. Mm-hmm. And when that happens, you've got one guy saying one thing and another guy saying another thing.
Yeah.
You don't know what to do.
You can't get away from, and this is one stat that I'm kind of going to harp on just for a little bit, and I noticed it when we were talking about basically the offseason roster rankings, and it was PFF or one of them that came out with it. And they put the overall AFC rosters and judged them offense and defense, and they put Jacksonville out of 16 AFC teams. They put them in that 12th to 14th spot, something like that. And then I looked at the entire NFL. Bottom line is they put the Pittsburgh Steelers ahead of Jacksonville. And I'm saying, how the heck is that possible? And I looked at both the defensive stats. Both of them gave up 342 yards per game, basically identical. But the difference was Pittsburgh gave up 32 touchdowns. Jacksonville gave up 44.
Right.
That's 12 more, Coach.
Right.
And I'm going to tell you, like I tell everybody, the only stat that matters to me is scoreboard.
Yes.
That's it.
Yeah.
How many points did you score? How many points did you give up?
Right. And I'll tell you this. When you see that big of a discrepancy in touchdowns, touchdowns come from big plays.
Yeah.
The majority of them.
Mm-hmm.
You don't see a lot of teams just drive down the field methodically and put points on the board. Most of the time there's a play involved. Do you remember at the end of the year, and unfortunately I'm getting old, I don't remember the exact scenario, but you remember the one where the tight end, and I can't even remember what team it was, but the tight end for the other team was wide open, went right down, straight down the field, and there was nobody around him, and he threw a touchdown pass. That comes from being dysfunctional. Yeah. And that's when you talk about teaching, you talk about making sure guys are exact on where they're supposed to be, how they're supposed to be there. Mm-hmm. You can blame the coaches, but you can also blame the players for not being 100% into it. So I think it's a combination, but I really believe this coaching staff is going to be better.
Yeah, and I think that's all right. So I pulled up the AFC roster rankings just so you can look at them, and it's not as bad as I originally said.
Right.
They're 10th in the AFC, so they weren't 12th or 14th. They weren't that far down, but they had the Steelers just ahead of them. They had the Browns 8th overall, and you guys can probably go to PFF and find the AFC roster rankings, and there's no question that they needed to add personnel. They've added starters on the defensive and the offensive side.
Yes.
But going back to your point, is that I've always felt like it is you could call it a three-pronged approach. It's the people making the personnel decisions that originally bring the player here.
Right. It's
the coach that develops them like you did, and it's the player itself, okay? Right. So it's incumbent on all of them. Player has to be responsible for his own performance.
Absolutely.
But the coach will make them better prepared.
Yeah, and again, if I'm in the D-line room and I'm getting told one thing and I'm in a linebacker room and I'm being told something different,
right?
You got a problem.
Yeah.
You can say it's the players, but usually when there's a dysfunction on defense, when there's a bunch of missed assignments, alignments, guys not being able to play a bunch, I can't blame the players for that. I've got to look at it myself as a coach and say, somewhere along the line, they're not getting something taught correctly. Yeah. And that's what I think is going to be the difference this year, in my opinion.
Now, they're not wearing helmets. They're only wearing shorts and jerseys. But alignment and assignment, we may use that on a Campo and Joe regular basis. But it does seem like when the offense comes to the line of scrimmage, the alignment and the assignment is quickly picked up on by this defense.
Well, the first thing I saw was communication, which I think is critical, especially in the secondary. Everybody's got to know what everybody's doing.
Right.
And a lot of it is based not on the call. The call in the huddle tells what coverage you're playing, but what the offense comes out in determines what part of that coverage is used. And that's all based on communication. And the one thing I have heard is a lot more talking amongst the guys this year in comparison to a year ago. So I think it just adds to what we've been talking about to this point is, it's what's demanded of you and what's important in making sure you're in the right spots. Communication is huge.
Yeah, and I just feel like I always use the hardware and software thing that if you got this hulking body, you're lightning fast, you're big and strong, but you don't have the software to go with it, then you're going to get out there and you're probably going to get either, if you're on defense, you're going to get blocked up pretty good.
Yep.
You're going to get moved out of the way, and you're going to be exposed. And so the more information these guys operate with, the better chance they have to succeed.
And that's what, we're asked all the time. You've asked it. Other guys have asked, how important are OTAs?
Yeah.
OTAs, off-season training, is where you find out mentally more than anything else who can handle what. You put in all of your. I'm just talking defense now. I don't know offensive guys. I don't know what they do.
He's a defensive guy.
But on defense, you put in your entire package basically, and there'll be some tweaks during the season. But you put in 90%, I'm going to say, of your package, and you see which guys can take it from the media room to the meeting room to the field. And that's the major part of off-season training, because you don't have the pads on. You can't work on some of the fundamentals when you don't have the pads on.
Right.
So that's what's important about what's going on right now. And let me say this. You've heard me say this before, too. If you have smart character guys in the room, those guys develop.
Yeah.
So when you talk about that three-pronged attack, one of them is the personnel people that bring those guys in.
It's true.
And I think what they're trying to do, from what I see, is make sure they have more of those guys that have leadership qualities based on the fact that they're smart, they've got great character, and they usually do what they're supposed to do when you tell them to do it.
Yeah, and so they're drafting that way, and then the other half of it is they went out and they got guys that have been in postseason locker rooms.
Absolutely, and been successful and been good at what they do.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of that is based on that. No longer do you have guys out there that you say, this is a dumb football player. You can't have very many of those guys, or else you're going to be in trouble.
Yeah.
And I think that's one thing that they're working on. And hopefully, when people talk about culture, you could say, if you win, you got good culture. If you lose, you got bad culture. I don't know. But the culture is that you got a bunch of players that believe the way you do and are smart and can take it from the meeting room to the field.
That's it. And I think the other part of the culture is making sure that each player challenges the other player.
Right.
Doesn't necessarily need to come from a coach.
Yeah, Leon says that all the time.
Yes.
I mean, how important it is for accountability amongst the team. And I agree.
And I'd like to see an Eric Armstead do that to that defensive front. Josh Allen, now that he's done something, do that to Trayvon Walker. Some of the other guys, we've mentioned Devin Lloyd on our show, says he wants to take on more leadership. Cisco said the same thing because he's going into a contract year. These guys absolutely need to take ownership.
One of the reasons that I loved Michael Irvin so much when he was with the Cowboys, and I'm not going to go through the whole story. You've already heard the story, but the bottom line is he did things off the field with the guys that allowed him to call on those guys during the ball game. That's how much he was thinking about what you're talking about, making a guy accountable for, hey, it's time for you to do things right in this ball game. Let's go.
Yeah, exactly. All right, great story. We're going to segue. We're going to get back to the Jags and OTAs. But he brings up Michael Irvin. Coach Campo, as we know, had just scores of years in Dallas. You got the news yesterday that Larry Allen passed away. Early 50s, 51, 52?
52.
52. Just sad as all get out. But I heard a story from one of the podcasts on Larry Allen, and it was such a great story. And this goes, and we'll probably bring it up on XL Primetime as well, but it goes to what you have talked about and what Leon has talked about. Anyway, as it goes, Larry Allen is given credit for asking questions in the meeting room that he knew the answers to, but he wanted to make sure that other guys heard it again. And then I heard a bunch of other ones, but that one hit me.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what about the guy. First of all, Larry Allen might be the best. I would guarantee he's the best guard ever play the game.
Drafted as a tackle, moved inside.
But he may be the best lineman that ever played the game.
Yeah.
The Campo and Joe podcast is brought to you by Bold City Heating and Air. Fast and reliable AC service.
He was not a vocal guy from that standpoint. He was kind of quiet, but he always had a smile on his face. If you criticized him for something, okay, he would smile at you. He just had that, and you knew he was soaking it in, just like you say about thinking about other ways to make sure they were winning. But the reason he smiled was because the other smile he was going to wipe off was the guy he was blocking against. He did it on the field as well as off the field. Yeah. And I love the guy. He was a humble, he was a giant,
a
gentle giant off the field and a beast on the field. He was really a good person, and it's just sad. The most difficult thing was I had just come off the practice field at the Jaguars yesterday. When I got in the car and saw on the phone, it went from I get excited and happy when I'm close to the field to one of the saddest days I can remember. And I was with him from 94 through 2002.
Wow.
So that's a lot of time with him.
And the way the stories were told was that he would try to destroy you, like you said. You're the enemy, and he was not. He was tireless in his pursuit.
I'll tell you
of
another
greatness.
quick story.
Yeah.
He the night before the game, a bunch of guys used to play cards. I don't know if you heard that story, but they'd play cards, and during the course of the day, they were playing the Eagles the next day. And so all of a sudden, in the middle of the card game, Larry just started hysterically laughing. And he kept laughing, and he kept laughing. No matter what happened, he'd lose a hand, and he just started laughing again. And the game was over, and a bunch of guys said, "Larry, what the heck are you laughing about?" He said, "I got to play against Reggie White tomorrow." So he was getting ready. I mean, he was ready to wipe the smile off of Reggie White's face.
That's great.
And he started off a little slow in the game, but he finished strong, believe me.
It's great. So we will have some more of those on prime time, but let's use that as a springboard into the Trevor conversation, and then we'll kind of wrap up our OTA thoughts from the one that we saw yesterday. Trevor Lawrence is stepping into that spotlight. He already is considered a leader. He is the quarterback. He's the generational one, which has been debated here of late. But he has a chance to step into that role, to make sure everybody knows, to push them harder, to challenge himself and to challenge others. What do you think about the time right now that Trevor's in?
Well, I think this is the time. I think that he's proven to us already with what happened over in Europe 2 years ago, and he bowed up and said, "I'm going to straighten this out," and did. Okay, so he's already proven he's got that kind of a mentality. But I think experience and seeing what happened last year and seeing the toughness that he displayed, even though he was hurt, and guys get after me about making excuses, but I'm telling you, his injury down the stretch, he didn't even get well until March.
Right.
Okay, so there was a reason that partly that he wasn't as effective down the stretch, okay? But the one thing about it is, I think when you hear Doug talk, the one thing about him is he's smart, he's tough, and I think he understands now how important his demeanor and how he reacts. He's not a yeller or a screamer, but you can see that he's talking to every one of those guys more, and I think that's what has to happen.
Yeah, and he's talking to the rookies. I saw him do it a year ago.
Absolutely.
I see him do a little more this year, which I love, and Brian Thomas he loves, and Gabe Davis, he was asked about him, and he's saying a lot of the right things, and he also says that it'd be nice if this contract is done, but if it's not, he still has a job to do.
Absolutely.
And that's how you got to look at it. But the whole of what we have now are, if Trent Baalke is to be given credit for, let's just say, the 3-year run that he's been making these decisions, is that guys all need to turn into leaders and playmakers.
Right.
That Trevor needs to make both of those, clean up the mistakes, take that big step forward, be the leader, like you see a Josh Allen, a Pat Mahomes, a Joey Burrow, some of these other guys do. And then the Devin Lloyds, the Siscos, the Campbells, they all need to come through as well.
Right. And let me say one thing about Trevor. My feeling is, he obviously was a turnover machine a year ago, and that has to stop, right? The ones that concern me more than anything else are the fumbles, because quarterbacks are going to throw interceptions. They shouldn't throw them a lot, but some of it is based on how much time they have to throw and where the people are around them and all that.
Right.
Which we've talked about improving the offensive line play and that type of thing. Fumbles can be fixed. That's in your mind saying, I'm not going to fumble the football, and I'm going to know when to go down and when to extend plays. And all of those things, a lot of that is mental.
Yeah.
And I believe he's smart enough to understand that he has to eliminate those.
And if he can knock them out, and we talked about this a little bit, the pocket presence, and you did this on the show. I did it on the show as well, but let's do it just a little bit here on the Campo and Joe podcast with what Greg Cosell had to say. He's a guy who studies quarterback. He punches the film in. He does his work. I'm not going to belittle Greg Cosell. He works hard. But the thing that got me the most is that he basically said he doesn't have a big, strong arm. Yes, hell yes, he does.
Of course he does.
And he's fairly accurate, but there were some off-platform and poor decisions. And then I think when that protection, which he really didn't have interiorly, when it eroded, and it eroded fast, by the time you snapped the ball, you had a couple seconds, you had to make a decision. He started to make poor decisions.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what he's got to eliminate. Yeah. And that's where those fumbles came from,
The
too.
last thing I would say about him is that he's not tough.
Oh, he's tough.
That's the last thing.
He's
right?
tough, yeah.
Well, just think about the fact that you can't do what you do physically. And you add that to the fact that he's getting pressure on him and there's guys around him all the time. You're going to make some bad decisions too.
Oh, yeah.
And part of it is the fact that he wasn't mobile at the end. He has to be a little bit mobile. No pass rush stopping is going to be 100%.
Right.
So to me, you improve that a little ways, and you in your mind say, I'm not going to get hit.
Right.
I'm going to execute. And if I on that clock, if I know I've got time on the clock, when to get out of there, he'll be fine.
Yeah.
And that to me is a combination. I think they have to improve the protection, and he can't be banged up all the time. No, that's the thing.
And when he felt that need, I got to get out of this pocket, it's breaking down. He either shuffled to the right or to the left, and then all of a sudden the ball's
out here somewhere.
And it's exposed and it's vulnerable, and then guys got their mitts on it and knocked it out.
Now, I don't want to be 100% that it's all on the protection. I mean, I think he's got to pay attention to what he's doing, and I think he's one of those guys that's smart enough to make that decision.
But let's make this declaration, and I'll make it, and hopefully you agree. You can disagree if you want, but it all has to be part of it. If you don't protect, you don't give him time. If you don't give him time, he's going to rush his decision, so on and so forth. But the thing more than anything else is the inability to say in a huddle, we need 2 yards, we're going to run the football and get it.
Exactly.
And they did not do that.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I didn't mention is they got to run the ball. And I don't know if you saw, we were watching yesterday, there was a lot of play action pass in the deal.
Yeah.
And with him under center.
Yeah, I love it because I believe Doug Peterson is going to have a much bigger hand in the play calling. He's the one who clearly stated that they couldn't get a 3rd and 2 with a run play. Yeah. He knows they need to run the ball better.
I'll promise you, when you got receivers that can run, got some speed, those deep crossing routes, that's where you make the big plays. It's not always just running by somebody because those DBs are pretty good too.
Yeah, they are.
But it's those deep crossing routes off of play action and stuff like that. That's where you make your money.
And you get Gabe doing it.
Yep.
You get Kirk doing it. Now you
Number
got Brian
7.
Thomas doing it.
Yeah.
And you got Evan Ingram.
Right.
So, all right, here's some numbers. Warren Sharp football, they're very good. Best quarterbacks on 3rd down last year. And you can be, like we said, analytics, you can find stuff that you like, find stuff you don't like.
Right.
But anyway, Dak Prescott was best on 3rd down. Now, he got chopped up in a lot of other areas, critical evaluation of him. But anyway, best on 3rd down. Jalen Hurts, best on 3rd down. And I found that kind of interesting because he also had his share of fumbles. Brock Purdy, that makes sense. He was very effective on 3rd. Tua, top 5. Jordan Love, top 5. So that's all good. Mahomes was 7th. But now let's drop down to where Trevor Lawrence was. Trevor Lawrence was after Deshaun Watson. Again, Watson was hurt, so he didn't have as many attempts. He was after Justin Fields, after Kyler Murray, after Russell flipping Wilson. This bothers me, and it's not just a Trevor thing, but the rankings from Sharp Analysis, this was quarterbacks on third down last year. Trevor was 30th, right behind Derek Carr.
Pressure.
Back to what you said a minute ago. That does not tell the whole story.
Pressure.
Yeah.
Pressure.
Yeah.
That's it.
Mm-hmm.
And not being able to run the ball and getting into the 3rd and 4s, 3s, 5s. I guarantee you those guys that are at the top had a bunch of 3rds and 4s, 3s, 5s, and were able to execute those, which you should be able to execute.
Yeah. So this has obviously got to change. All right. So as we wrap up a little bit of our OTAs, let's just hit on a couple of other things that you like, that you saw. You said play action, under center, things like this. Heck, Evan Ingram in the backfield blocking for ETN. Those little wheel routes that the running backs can do. I've seen a lot more passes for running backs. Dearnest, Tank, all those guys.
Yeah, I don't know, where that sits. I think they have guys that can execute, those situations for sure. Really, to be honest with you, I'm getting a pretty good feel of where the linebackers are lining up. I'm getting a pretty good feel for, what they're doing defensively more than offensively because I'm watching it more.
Yeah.
I just watched Trevor throw a little bit. I don't.
He's not missing much right now.
No, as a matter of fact, we stood there yesterday, and you made the comment that he's thrown a bunch of passes here, and he's hit every one of them.
And what I like and what I'm looking for, and this is what we asked Eddie Thompson yesterday, and again, it's against. It's non-padded.
Yeah.
I totally get it. But what I want to see from Trevor is read.
And go.
Yeah.
And go.
Yeah.
Well, all I know is defensively, they've got some athletes out there. And offensively, they've got some athletes out there. So to me, it comes down to, I think they've improved the front as much backups as starters,
Better depth.
which I think is important with that group because you have to rotate those guys, right? I think offensively, time is going to tell on the offensive line, but I think that the addition of Morse is a plus.
Yep, sounds good. All right, Coach, we had a great time. Dave Campo, we appreciate him for hanging out with us. Joe C., I'll talk to you on XL Primetime. Love talking Jaguar football. Appreciate you guys hanging out with us.
The Campo and Joe podcast is brought to you by Bold City Heating and Air. Fast and reliable AC service.